Have you ever wondered why so many people say the first $100,000 is the hardest, but once you hit that number, everything starts to change? Why is it that your money suddenly starts growing faster? Opportunities seem to appear out of nowhere, and wealth begins to compound almost on autopilot? Today, I want to take you into the mindset, the math, and the strategy behind how your first $100,000 quietly, almost secretly, turns into 1 million. And I promise you this: once you understand what you're about to hear, you'll never look at money the same way again. Let's start with a truth that most people never hear early enough in life. Wealth doesn't grow in a straight line. It grows slowly, 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 and then suddenly. And that suddenly moment doesn't happen at $1 million. It doesn't happen at 5 million. It happens way earlier, at a point most people think is small. It happens at the first 100,000. That is the point where the entire game shifts from you working for money to your money working for you. But before we break down the numbers and the math behind why 100,000 is such a powerful turning point, I want you to imagine something. Picture the version of you 10 years from now, sitting somewhere comfortable, maybe on a balcony or at a desk or in a living room you love. And that future version of you is calmer, more confident, less stressed about money, because they made a decision today, a decision to understand wealth differently, a decision to take money seriously, a decision to stop thinking that getting rich is luck and start understanding that it is a system. That's the person we're building in the next few minutes. So let's talk about why the first 100,000 feels like climbing a mountain with a backpack full of rocks. Because in the beginning, every dollar comes from your effort. You work, you save, you sacrifice, you avoid things your friends buy, you skip nights out, you say no to unnecessary purchases. In the early stages, you're carrying all the weight. And that is why most people never get to 100,000, not because they can't, but because they get tired during the stage where their money is not yet helping them. But here is where it gets interesting. Once you hit 100,000, the entire game shifts. It's like walking into a gym with a spotter instead of lifting alone. Suddenly, your money starts helping you lift. Suddenly, you're not the only one doing the work. Suddenly, compounding steps in, and if you stay consistent, something remarkable begins to happen. Imagine you invest that first 100,000 and it grows 10% in a year. That's $10,000. $10,000 that you did not work for. $10,000 that show up even if you take a break, even if you're tired, even if life gets messy. $10,000 that arrive because you put money in a position to work. Now think about what tens of dollars a year looks like over time if you keep investing. In 5 years, that's $50,000. In 10 years, that's $100,000. But remember, that's just the growth, not your contributions. And it doesn't even include reinvesting the gains. And this is where the quiet transformation begins. Most people underestimate how quickly money snowballs because they think linearly. They think if they save the same amount every year, they'll end up with a predictable number. But wealth is not linear, it's exponential. And your first 100,000 is the moment that puts you under the exponential curve. Before that milestone, your money grows, but slowly. After that milestone, your portfolio becomes a machine that speeds up every single year. To see how powerful this is, let's run a simple mental experiment. Suppose you invest $100,000 and you continue adding money every month, even something modest like $1,000. At a reasonable rate of return, around 8 to 10% a year, that $100,000 becomes $200,000, then $300,000, then $500,000, and eventually it crosses $1 million. But here's the part that shocks people when they first hear it. Most of that growth doesn't come from your contributions. It comes from the money you already invested. At the start, you contribute more than your investments make. But later, your investments make more than you contribute. And eventually, your investments make more in a year than you used to make at your job. That moment is when wealth begins to feel effortless. Think about it like planting a tree. When you plant a seed, you water it, you protect it, you take care of it, and for a long time, nothing seems to grow. maybe a tiny leaf here, a small stem there, but nothing impressive. You could cut it down and feel like you didn't lose much. But if you protect that seed and keep watering it, eventually it becomes a tree. And once it's a tree, it produces fruit every season without asking for much. That's exactly what your first 100,000 is. It is the seed, and the $1 million is the tree. Now, let's talk about the psychological side of this, because mindset is everything when building wealth. People who never build wealth often fail, not because of lack of income, but because of lack of patience. They want flashy results quickly. They want big wins immediately. They want to skip the part where the growth is small. But here's the truth: the small growth is the most important part. That is where you train discipline. That is where you train habits. That is where you learn how to manage money. That is where you learn how to say no. That is where you build the foundation of becoming a millionaire. If you dropped $100,000 into the lap of someone who doesn't have the discipline, they will lose it. But if you give it to someone who built it slowly through discipline, they will grow it. Not because of luck, but because they learned how money behaves. Once you have your first 100,000, the way you think about money changes. Suddenly you are no longer desperate for quick wins. Suddenly you don't chase every new crypto coin or meme stock. Suddenly you understand risk differently. You start focusing on consistent returns rather than gambling for huge ones. You think long term, and thinking long term is the secret weapon of every self-made millionaire. Let's talk about compounding in a more practical, relatable way. When you invest money, your money makes money, and then the money that your money made also makes money, and then the money made from that money also makes money. This chain effect grows longer and stronger every year. In the beginning, it's weak, a few dollars here and there, but after a decade, the chain becomes incredibly powerful. And once the compounding chain is long enough, it becomes almost impossible to stop. Imagine you hit $500,000. Now 10% is $50,000 a year. $50,000 for doing nothing. That is someone's full-time salary, and your money is generating it while you sleep. Now imagine you hit $1 million. 10% is $100,000 a year. That is more than most people make working full-time. Your money produces it automatically. But here's the secret no one tells you. The hardest part was the first 100,000, not the million, because the million is the result of habits, consistency, discipline, patience, and the math working in your favor. Let's talk about habits for a moment, because if you don't get these right, the journey becomes harder. Wealth is not built by one big decision. It's built by thousands of small ones. It's built when you skip the unnecessary purchase. It's built when you invest even when you don't feel like it. It's built when you stay invested during a market dip instead of panicking. It's built every time you choose future you over present you. And the beautiful thing is, the more you do this, the easier it becomes. Habits compound just like money does. The discipline you build at 10,000 makes it easier to save 20%. The discipline at 20 makes it easier to save 50%. And the discipline at 50 makes it possible to reach 100. And once you reach 100, the habits are so strong that reaching 1 million feels almost natural. People underestimate how powerful small, consistent habits are. They think they need massive income or extremely high returns. But the real power lies in persistence. If you save and invest consistently, even average returns will make you wealthy. That's why hitting the first 100,000 is such a big deal. Because to reach that milestone, you must develop the habits that will naturally push you toward 1 million. Now let's talk about lifestyle. One of the biggest enemies of wealth is lifestyle creep. When you start earning more, you start spending more. When you get a raise, you upgrade your life instead of upgrading your investments. That kills compounding. The people who reach 100,000 are the ones who learn to control lifestyle early. They learn to live slightly below their means. They understand the difference between looking rich and being rich, and that maturity is a massive competitive advantage. Another key factor in turning 100,000 into 1 million is understanding time. Time is the most powerful financial tool you'll ever have. Time amplifies everything, your good decisions and your bad ones. If you invest early, time multiplies your money. If you delay, time multiplies your regret. Every year you wait to invest is not 1 year lost. It's 10 years lost at the end, because the final 10 years of compounding are the most explosive. Picture this: the difference between investing at age 25 versus age 35 can be millions of dollars by retirement, even if the contributions are the same. Not because you invested more, but because you gave compounding more time. Time is the cheat code, and the earlier you understand this, the faster your wealth builds. Now, I want to address something that a lot of people feel when they hear about the importance of the first 100,000. They think, but I'm far from that. I'm not even close. How can I ever reach it? And the answer is step by step. You don't climb a mountain by looking at the peak. You climb it by taking the next step in front of you. You start with $10, then 50, then 100. You build momentum. You build consistency. You build confidence. And every dollar becomes easier than the last. The hardest dollar you will ever save is the first one. After that, every dollar gets easier. And once you get to 1,000, you realize it wasn't as impossible as you thought. Then you hit 10,000 and you start to see the power of discipline. Then you reach 25,000, something changes. You start believing you can actually do this. And by the time you hit 50,000, you feel unstoppable. And once you hit 100,000, the game is on your side. Now let's talk about avoiding the biggest mistakes that prevent people from reaching 1 million. One of the biggest mistakes is chasing quick wins. People think investing is like gambling. They jump into whatever is trending. They want to double their money in a month. But the people who get rich slowly are the ones who get rich reliably. You can't build wealth on luck. You build it by owning good assets and letting them grow. Another mistake is thinking investing is only for people who already have money. Investing is how people get money. Waiting to invest until you feel ready is the same as waiting to go to the gym until you're already in shape. You start now with whatever you have. The earlier you start, the easier the journey becomes. Another mistake is pulling money out too early. People start investing, the market drops, and they panic. They forget that every millionaire investor lived through multiple crashes, recessions, corrections, and downturns. The reason they're millionaires is because they stayed invested through the storm. Markets always recover, but those who sell during the storm lose. Your mindset during market dips determines whether your 100,000 becomes 1 million or goes back to zero. Now, let's get back to the idea of how that first 100,000 quietly turns into 1 million. The reason I say quietly is because the transformation doesn't feel dramatic while it's happening. It feels almost boring. You invest consistently. You reinvest your gains. You ignore the noise. You stay disciplined. And then one day you look at your account and you realize the money has grown far beyond the effort you put in. That is the quiet miracle of compounding. The first few years feel slow. You might invest for a whole year and see your portfolio grow by less than what you saved. But later, you invest for a year and your portfolio grows more than you saved. And eventually your portfolio grows more in a year than you used to earn in an entire year of work. That is when the quiet becomes loud. That is when wealth becomes visible. That is when people say you're lucky or privileged, not realizing you planted the seed long before the tree grew. So how exactly does 100,000 turn into 1 million? Through patience multiplied by consistency, powered by compounding, guided by discipline, and protected by long-term thinking. You don't need extraordinary income. You don't need extraordinary intelligence. You need extraordinary patience. And patience is free. Everyone can have it. Most people just don't practice it. When you hit 100,000, you have proven you can save. You have proven you can invest. You have proven you can stay consistent. You have proven you can delay gratification. And once you can do those things, reaching 1 million is not a question of if, it's a question of when. Before we wrap this up, I want you to remember one thing. Wealth is built in silence. It is built by decisions no one sees. It is built by habits no one celebrates. It is built by choosing the long term over the short term. It is built by saying no more often than you say yes. It is built every time you invest instead of overspending. It is built every time you trust the process instead of chasing shortcuts. And the reward for this quiet discipline is a life where money is no longer a constant worry, a life where you have options, a life where you have freedom. Your first 100,000 is the foundation, the million is the result. But the person you become along the journey is the real reward, because once you learn how to build 100,000, you can build 1 million. And once you can build 1 million, you can build anything. So start today, not tomorrow, not next year, when you feel ready. Start with what you have where you are right now. Every dollar is a vote for your future. Keep voting, keep investing, keep believing in the long term. And remember, your first 100,000 is not the finish line. It is the beginning of everything.